Damn them all, if only betrayal came with a warning label. My name is Megan Whitmore, a name I was once proud of, until my own blood turned it into a curse. I'm 23, a single mother, an artist, and the girl they thought would disappear. But I didn't. I came back, with a child, a brush, and a secret that could ruin them all. My name is Megan Whitmore. I'm 23 years old, and I live with my son Liam in a small, sun-drenched apartment overlooking the central square of Hilford, Vermont. Hilford isn't the kind of place that makes headlines. It's quiet, gentle, a town where strangers still nod at each other on the street, and local artists display their work in bakery windows. The buildings are old and European in style, all wrought iron balconies and faded shutters, like they're holding on to stories from a past no one talks about. Every morning I stand by the narrow kitchen window, sipping black coffee from a chipped blue mug. The view outside hasn't changed in years, cobblestone paths, swirling leaves, and across the square, the Whitmore Gallery, once the pride of my family. The name still hangs in bold serif letters above the arched entrance, stubbornly clinging to a legacy that no longer belongs to me. To most it's just an old building. To me, it's a ghost. Moom. Liam's voice pulled me back. He came bounding into the kitchen, holding up a wrinkled watercolor. I finished The Sad Dog. I crouched to his level, ruffling his soft brown hair. You really see things, you know that? That dog really was sad at the park yesterday. He nodded seriously. His ears were drooping and his eyes looked like he missed someone. God, that child. Sometimes I wonder, did he inherit that sensitivity from me? That ability to feel things before understanding them? I remember when I was his age, I'd draw for hours and cry if someone told me to stop. The world always told me I was too much, too soft, too sensitive. But now, that softness is what gets me through each day. I teach children's art classes at the Hilford Community Center. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't come with benefits or prestige, but I get to paint. I get to show children, some shy, some loud, all a little lost, that their feelings have color, shape, and texture. Our apartment is cramped but alive. The walls are covered in Liam's doodles, my half-finished canvases, and love notes written in paint. Some of my pieces hang in the local cafe next to cinnamon bun posters. I don't paint for galleries anymore. I paint to remember that I still exist. Today I get to work with clay, right? Liam asked, already stuffing his backpack with a chaotic mix of colored pencils and Pokemon stickers. That's right, I smiled. Miss Marion's visiting your class today. She's the famous potter. I want you to go wild with your creativity, okay? Liam jumped up and down. I will. I'll make a dragon. I laughed, but something in me stirred. That quiet ache again. The kind that seeps in when you remember everything you lost just to live this life. Because once upon a time, I was Megan Whitmore, eldest daughter of Richard and Amelia Whitmore, heirs of the most renowned art gallery in Hilford. I used to walk those glossy marble floors. I used to believe I'd someday hang my paintings there. But dreams bend under the weight of expectations. When I was 17, I told my mother I wanted to apply to an art college. She smiled, folded the application, and placed it in the drawer without a word. Pouting is fun, she said lightly, but it won't feed you. They didn't believe in art as expression, only as investment. I was meant to manage, to curate, to continue the family name, not stain it with messy emotions, but I never painted to be seen. I painted to breathe. Then came the moment that split my life in two. I was barely 18 when I stared down at that pregnancy test. 2 lines. I tested again and again, same result. Pregnant. My hands shook, but oddly my heart didn't. A strange calm settled inside me, like I already knew what I had to do. Was I terrified? Of course. But under it all, a quiet joy flickered. Could I really do this? Could I be a mother? Would he still love me? Would they understand? I didn't have the answers, but I had one truth, clearer than any gallery light. I wasn't giving up this child. Would you like me to continue directly with part 2, inciting incident, or refine any part of this first? I still remember the day I walked back into the Whitmore estate, the very house I'd grown up in, with the test stick hidden deep in my coat pocket. It was mid-October. Hilford was dressed in amber leaves and low gray skies, like the whole town was holding its breath. I stood at the iron gate for a long time, my fingers curled tightly around the test. 2 lines, undeniable, a truth I couldn't erase, even if I wanted to. The marble floors inside echoed with every step I took. My heart pounded louder than my heels. In the kitchen, my mother was peeling apples. Her back was turned, her posture perfect, her hair not a strand out of place. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, annoyed. "If this is about that art school again, Megan." "No," I said quickly, swallowing the lump in my throat. "This is different." She arched one perfect eyebrow, waiting. I took a breath I didn't know I was holding. "I'm pregnant." For a moment everything stood still. The paring knife slipped from her hand, clattering against the ceramic sink. Then silence. Not the kind that comes with peace, but the kind that crushes you. My father's footsteps echoed from down the hall. He appeared in the doorway, magazine in hand, and looked from my mother to me. "What did you say?" I'm pregnant," I said again. "It's Leo's." His face didn't change, it hardened, slowly. A storm cloud behind still eyes. "That boy?" he asked, voice like winter. "That boy with no prospects, no background, no name? He's not just, I love him," I stammered, "and I'm keeping the baby." I was trembling, but there was something steady inside me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't shame. This was life, real, growing, and mine. My mother stood straighter. "You think that makes you noble? You think becoming a teenage mother turns you into some kind of tragic heroine?" I shook my head. "No, but it makes me a mother, and I'm not giving that up." My father turned to the window, his back to me. "If you walk this path, Megan, you walk it alone." The words landed like stones. "What?" "You are no longer a daughter of this family," he said, still not looking at me. "You've made your choice, now leave." No shouting, no tears, just the cold, clipped dismissal of someone more worried about legacy than love. They gave me 24 hours. No more. I packed what I could. A backpack, my sketchbook, and $28 I'd quietly taken from my little brother's piggy bank. No one stopped me. No one asked where I'd go. No one said goodbye. That night, I sat on a bench outside my high school with nothing but a phone and 100 questions spinning in my head. Was I crazy to believe Leo would stay? Could I do this? Was I already failing this child? I pressed the call button. His voice came through, familiar and distant all at once. "Megan? You're calling late. I need to see you. It's important. I'm pregnant." Silence. 1 second. 2. A sigh. "Are you sure?" "I took 3 tests." Another pause, then softer. "Megan, I can't be a dad. Not now. I got the scholarship. I'm moving to New York next month. This is everything I've worked for." "And what about me?" I whispered. "What about us?" "You'll be okay," he said. "You're strong." And just like that, click. Gone. The wind cut through my thin coat, but it couldn't reach the deeper chill settling in my bones. I was 18. Alone. Rejected by the boy I loved. Abandoned by the family who raised me. And still, something in me refused to collapse. Because I had someone else now. A tiny life, not yet born, but already anchoring me to a truth I didn't know I had. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing. Would you like me to continue to part 3, Rising Action, where Megan begins building her new life and identity from the ground up? Dele phần 3, Rising Action, vượt qua khó khăn, xây dựng cuộc sống mới, được viết tiếp mạch cảm xúc, văn phong và góc nhìn của Megan, như 2 phần trước. Part 3, Rising Action, Rebuilding from the Ground Up. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on that splintered bench outside the school until the sun began to rise behind the clock tower. Pink light spreading across a sky I used to believe only belonged to people with homes. My phone battery was at 2% when I dialed the last number I could think of. Miss Lorraine Durain, my high school art teacher, the only adult who ever really saw me. Her voice crackled through the phone, groggy but alert. "Megan? Honey, what's going on?" And I broke. I didn't even try to stay composed. The words poured out of me between gasps and tears. Pregnancy. The eviction. Leo. The silence. The bench. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. "Sweetheart," she said gently when I'd run out of breath, "I'm coming to get you. You're not doing this alone." That was the first act of kindness that saved me. She brought me home. Not to some big house or spare guest room, but to a little wooden cottage tucked behind her overgrown garden. It smelled like tea and turpentine. Inside was a small bed, an old desk, and a chipped brass lamp that barely lit the room. But to me, it was heaven. Each morning I helped her with chores. I washed dishes, watered plants, and sometimes just sat in silence trying to remember how to breathe. In the afternoons, she brought out watercolors and brushes. We painted side by side, no questions asked. Sometimes I cried while painting, sometimes I laughed, but I always felt safe. You don't have to rush toward anything, she told me once, handing me a fresh canvas. But if you want to keep going, even if it's just one step at a time, I'll walk with you. I stayed. I stayed through the nausea, the whispers at school, the sideways glances from old neighbors. I stayed even when I was too tired to eat and too scared to sleep. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just trying to be honest. I went back to school. Miss Lorraine made sure of it. I attended class with swollen ankles and a loose coat that couldn't hide much. I submitted assignments between doctor visits. I studied art education during long nights with my feet propped up and a cold rag on my neck. By the time graduation came, Liam was the size of a small watermelon inside me. I walked across the stage with a belly full of hope and a heart stitched together by quiet strength. 3 weeks later, in a modest hospital with flickering lights and no private rooms, I gave birth. Liam came screaming into the world on a July afternoon. No father waiting in the hall, no family flowers, just me, aching, exhausted, terrified, and Miss Lorraine holding my hand the entire time. "He's strong," the nurse said as she placed him in my arms. I named him Liam, strong-willed protector. That night, as I held his tiny fingers and watched him breathe, I made myself a promise. I would give him a life filled with love, not conditions. I would build a home, not a pedestal. And no matter how hard it got, I would never let him feel like a burden. For the first 2 years, we survived. I worked part-time at a bakery downtown, took online classes in art education, and babysat during mornings while Miss Lorraine watched Liam. I fell asleep at the kitchen table more nights than I could count, paintbrush in one hand, baby bottle in the other. But even in the exhaustion, there was joy. Every night, I looked at Liam sleeping in that old wooden crib Miss Lorraine found at a garage sale, and I whispered, "We're okay. We're still here." And we were. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I had just finished wiping down the last paintbrushes after class. Liam was in the corner, carefully peeling the paper off his latest drawing. A mother and child under a red umbrella. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another email from the community center or a school newsletter. But then I saw the name on the screen. Chloe Whitmore. My fingers froze mid-motion. I hadn't seen or spoken to my sister in nearly 6 years. The last time we shared a room was the night I was forced to leave home, the night she watched, wide-eyed and silent, as our parents turned their backs on me. I stared at the name for a long time. Was this a mistake? Curiosity outweighed hesitation. I picked up. "Megan," her voice was soft, familiar in the strangest way. "It's me, Chloe." I stood motionless in the quiet art room, the sound of children's laughter from the hallway fading like background noise. "What is it?" I asked. My voice came out calmer than I felt. "I'm getting married next month," she said after a pause. "And I want you to come." The air around me shifted. My thoughts felt too loud, colliding in my head all at once. Getting married? Why now? Why me? I said nothing. Her next words came slower, more cautious. "It's not just the wedding. Dad's health, it's gotten worse. And Mom, she's changed. They both have. They want to see you." I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. Changed? After pretending I didn't exist for 6 years? Chloe didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "I can't defend what they did. I miss you. And I've been following your art online. Liam, he looks just like you when you were little." That name. Hearing her say my son's name hit me deeper than I expected. I gripped the phone tighter. "They want to see you," she said again, gently. "And they sent you something." The next afternoon, while Liam and I were setting up paints, the mailman dropped off an envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. Inside was a short letter, written in his precise, slanted script. "This is a portion of the trust fund you were meant to receive. If you're willing, I'd like to see you again. Not to justify anything, only to listen. I hope you'll consider it. Richard Whitmore." Enclosed was a check, a sum larger than what I'd made in the past year. But it wasn't the money that shook me. It was the first time he had written my name. Megan, not that girl. Not her. That night, while washing dishes, Liam tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, do I have grandparents?" I looked into his bright blue eyes. He wasn't asking for anything grand, just truth. Yes, I said softly, but they live very far away. Can I meet them? His voice was so innocent, so full of wonder. And I didn't have the heart to lie. That night I barely slept. Was I ready to face them? Could I walk into the same home that had closed its doors on me? But could I deny Liam the chance to know where he came from, not just the pain, but the pieces of love that might still remain? By morning I had my answer. I texted Chloe, "I'll come, but I'm doing this for Liam, not for them." After David left, something shifted, not just in me, but around me. The past had come knocking again, but this time I didn't flinch. I had drawn my boundary and stood my ground, and maybe that act alone cracked open something larger than I could see in the moment. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. It was my father. Not a text, a call. His voice, still slightly cautious, came through. "Megan, are you free this Saturday morning?" I hesitated. "Is something wrong?" "No, He paused, like he was searching for the right words, something he hadn't had to do for most of his life. "I'd like to come to your art class, if you'll have me." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. My heart wasn't racing this time. It was still curious. "Class starts at 9, I said. "If you're serious, be on time." "I will," he said quietly. "Would it be all right if I brought some of my old sketches?" My breath caught. That was the first time he'd ever acknowledged that part of himself around me. The part that loved art, the part that once lived before image swallowed it whole. "Sure," I whispered. "Bring them." That Saturday, the classroom smelled of poster paint and apple juice, like it always did. Liam had been too excited to sleep. He'd even packed an extra watercolor set for Grandpa Richard. When the door finally creaked open, Liam sprinted to it before I could. My father walked in with careful steps, holding a roll of canvas sketches tied with an old string. He wore a pale shirt and no tie, a small but telling detail. His eyes scanned the room, the sunlight bouncing off shelves of paint bottles and crayon boxes. "You designed all this?" he asked softly, his gaze landing on the sign above the board, "Ms. Megan's art class." "Every color," I nodded, "every chair, every supply bought from months of saving tips and part-time work. It's not the Whitmore Gallery, but it's real." He said nothing, but I caught the faintest movement at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, not yet, but something softer. He walked slowly along the back wall, pausing at Liam's latest drawing, a snow-covered forest lit in blues and purples, a mother and child watching stars above a frozen lake. "This is his?" he asked. "Yes, but I don't push him. If he chooses a different path someday, that's fine too." He looked at me, this time not as an extension of his legacy, but as someone entirely her own. Later that morning, he unrolled his old sketches for the children. They weren't perfect. Some were faded, others incomplete. But the kids loved them, asked questions, pointed at shading techniques, tried to copy the lines with shaky fingers. For the first time, I watched my father talk about art not like an investment, but like wonder. They called him the old art teacher. And Liam beamed. That Wednesday, something else happened. My mother showed up, unannounced. She stood at the edge of the park where Liam and I were sketching birds in the trees. In her hands was a small tin of warm apple pie and a plastic folder of coloring pages. "For Liam," she said carefully. "If he wants." He ran to her. Not out of attachment, but out of curiosity. She knelt and began telling him a strange, made-up story about a painting owl who opened a gallery under a tree. And he laughed. Loud. Free. It was awkward, hesitant, but real. Every week after that, she invited him to the park. Sometimes they painted. Sometimes she just listened. And slowly, the woman I once feared, so obsessed with perfection, began to show me something else. A grandmother, not flawless, but trying. At home, I caught Liam humming to himself while drawing, a sound I hadn't heard in years. He was lighter. I was lighter. And maybe that was the most healing thing of all. It didn't happen through grand gestures or sweeping apologies. It happened quietly. Through pie, through paint, through presence. And for the first time in years, I believed this. Some families don't heal through words. They heal when someone finally decides to stay. By late autumn, the leaves in Hilford had turned brittle gold. The mornings were crisp, the kind that made breath visible and coffee necessary. One afternoon, as Liam and I were cleaning brushes under the weak museum lights, I received a message from Chloe. "The Whitmore Gallery is planning a new exhibit. Title, The New Generation. I've convinced the board. We want your students' art. Will you say yes?" Not a smile, not yet, but something softer. He walked slowly along the back wall, pausing at Liam's latest drawing, a snow-covered forest lit in blues and purples, a mother and child watching stars above a frozen lake. "This is his?" he asked. "Yes, but I don't push him. If he chooses a different path someday, that's fine too." He looked at me, this time not as an extension of his legacy, but as someone entirely her own. Later that morning, he unrolled his old sketches for the children. They weren't perfect. Some were faded, others incomplete. But the kids loved them, asked questions, pointed at shading techniques, tried to copy the lines with shaky fingers. For the first time I watched my father talk about art not like an investment, but like wonder. They called him the old art teacher. And Liam beamed. That Wednesday, something else happened. My mother showed up, unannounced. She stood at the edge of the park where Liam and I were sketching birds in the trees. In her hands was a small tin of warm apple pie and a plastic folder of coloring pages. "For Liam," she said carefully. "If he wants." He ran to her, not out of attachment, but out of curiosity. She knelt and began telling him a strange made-up story about a painting owl who opened a gallery under a tree. And he laughed. Loud. Free. It was awkward. Hesitant, but real. Every week after that, she invited him to the park. Sometimes they painted, sometimes she just listened. And slowly, the woman I once feared, so obsessed with perfection, began to show me something else. A grandmother, not flawless, but trying. At home, I caught Liam humming to himself while drawing, a sound I hadn't heard in years. He was lighter. I was lighter. And maybe that was the most healing thing of all. It didn't happen through grand gestures or sweeping apologies. It happened quietly, through pie, through paint, through presence. And for the first time in years, I believed this. Some families don't heal through words. They heal when someone finally decides to stay. By late autumn, the leaves in Hilford had turned brittle gold. The mornings were crisp, the kind that made breath visible and coffee necessary. One afternoon, as Liam and I were cleaning brushes under the weak museum lights, I received a message from Chloe. "The Whitmore Gallery is planning a new exhibit, title, The New Generation. I've convinced the board we want your students' art. Will you say yes?" I reread the message 3 times, unsure whether my heart was racing from excitement or fear. The Whitmore Gallery. That place had once felt like a tomb to me, cold, pristine, filled with portraits of dead painters and expectations I could never meet. And now they were asking me to fill its walls with finger-painted forests and crayon-colored dreams. That night, Chloe came over for tea. We sat cross-legged on the living room rug while Liam played with colored chalk on the balcony. "You're the only one," she said, "who truly understands what it means to plant seeds with art. Not just technique, but feeling, confidence, identity." I hesitated. What if people mock it? Call it amateur, childish? Chloe looked at me. "Let them. That's the point. Art isn't just what hangs in silence behind glass, it's what spills out of messy little hands and changes the shape of a day." So I said yes. Not to reclaim the past, but to rewrite it. The opening day of the new generation was cold, with light rain tapping against the tall gallery windows. But inside, the rooms glowed. We framed every child's painting at eye level for kids, not adults. Next to each piece was a small card handwritten by me, describing what the student had felt while painting it. Sad because his dog ran away. Happy like the cupcake she had on her birthday. Scared of the dark but painted stars anyway. I stood near Liam's piece, a mother and son riding bikes under falling cherry blossoms. Gerald Monroe, the same art critic who noticed Liam at the wedding, approached again. He studied the piece in silence before saying, "It's not just talent, it's being nurtured the right way. That's rarer than you think." I nodded, too emotional to speak. Behind me, I felt the quiet presence of my father. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes were fixed on the paintings, his hands behind his back like he used to stand during gallery launches. But now, he wasn't a gatekeeper. He was a grandfather, a student of a second chance. Liam tugged his sleeve and handed him a brush. "Can we paint something together, Grandpa?" And for the first time my father smiled fully, not the polite public one, but something genuine. He knelt beside Liam, dipped the brush, and added a soft stroke of blue to the corner of a sky. As they worked, I stepped back, letting the moment breathe. From a distance, I watched a man who once silenced color, now help his grandson bring it to life. My mother arrived later with a tray of homemade cookies and stories about how she once painted flowers on the inside of her closet door as a child. Liam was in awe. "You painted too, Grandma?" "Just daisies," she shrugged, eyes twinkling. "Don't tell your grandpa, I never stayed within the lines." And we laughed. Not because everything was perfect, but because something was finally growing again. Not from pressure or pride, but from presence and choice. By the end of the afternoon, the exhibit was buzzing with voices. Not hushed admiration, but giggles, running feet, parents taking photos, children pointing, beaming. The gallery had never felt so alive. As we locked up for the night, Chloe whispered to me, "This isn't just an exhibit, it's a beginning." And maybe she was right, because in that space once reserved for legacy and status, now hung the imperfect, vivid stories of a new generation. Stories born not of expectation, but of love. By December, Hilford had slipped into winter's quiet grip. Snow fell in slow, drifting sheets. The rooftops wore a blanket of white. Twinkling lights lined the shop windows, and the town square smelled of pine and roasted chestnuts. In our little apartment, the radiator hissed, the gingerbread cookies cooled on the counter, and Liam sat by the window, coloring Santa Claus with thick red strokes. He looked up suddenly. "Mommy, will we have dinner together on Christmas?" I smiled. "Of course we will. Just like always." But this year, always felt different. Because for the first time in 6 years, we weren't eating alone. We weren't hiding. That Christmas Eve, the round table in our living room held roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a pie my father baked, and a lopsided candle Liam insisted on painting gold. My father sat beside Liam, helping him cut meat with practiced hands. My mother poured cider and complimented the decorations, even the string lights that flickered unevenly above the window. Chloe brought homemade cranberry bread and the most awkward but heartfelt board game gift for Liam. He tore through the wrapping like it was magic. No one gave speeches, no one mentioned the past. We just were. After dinner, we stepped onto the porch. Snow was falling again, soft and steady. Liam ran ahead to catch flakes with his tongue, his red sweater bouncing in the light. My father stood beside me, silent for a moment. Then he said, almost to himself, "You've built something I never could." I looked at him, not with bitterness, not anymore, just clarity. "I built what I needed," I replied, "and it's stronger than anything we ever tried to protect." He nodded slowly, eyes misting as he watched Liam race in circles. "I was afraid back then," he said, "of failure, of judgment, of losing everything we worked for. And in trying not to lose what you had," I said gently, "you almost lost me." He turned to me, and now, I thought about it. About Miss Lorraine's garden. About the late nights with paint-stained fingers and a baby pressed to my chest. About every moment I stood when the world expected me to fall. "Now," I said, "you're here, and that's more than I ever thought I'd say." We didn't hug, but something passed between us. Unspoken and solid. A thread rewoven not from apology, but from choice. Later that night, as I tucked Liam into bed, he whispered, "Mommy, I don't want any presents." I paused. "No?" He shook his head. "I just want us to have dinner together every Christmas, like today." I knelt beside him, my hand smoothing over his soft curls. "Me too, sweetheart," I whispered. "Me too." He closed his eyes, the kind of peaceful only a child can hold, the kind born not from perfection, but from feeling safe. As I stood at the door, I looked back at him. My little boy, my reason, my beginning. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the warmth lingered, not from the food or the fire, but from something deeper. This wasn't the ending I'd once imagined. It was better, because it was mine. And in a world where legacy once meant galleries and names on plaques, I had created a new legacy. A son who knew love. A family rebuilt, not with grand gestures, but with quiet presence. A life not defined by what I lost, but by what I chose to protect. And that was everything.